Good day, grade 11 students. I've made this video on timelines to help you with the concept. It's important to read the question first before we get started and to do the timeline before we do any calculations. It tells us that SIPO invests 30,000 Rand for 6 years and that his investment earns interest at 12% per annum compounded monthly for the first 2 years. Thereafter, the interest rate changes to 10.8% per annum compounded semi-annually for the rest of the period. Calculate the value of the investment at the end of 6 years, and there were no other transactions on the account. So that means that no additional money was either added to or subtracted from the account during this time. We also know that we need to set up our timeline for 6 years. So we begin with T0, which is our starting point, initial, T1 1 year later, T2, T3, T4, T5, and finishing off with T6. It tells us that SIPO invests 30,000 Rand. So he does this initially. So at T0 is where he deposits the 30,000 Rand. And then it tells us that it earns interest at a rate of 12%. So we would write that as 12 divided by 100, which is 0.12. And then we need to divide that by 12 because it is compounded monthly. The interest rate changes for the remainder of the period. So for the remaining 4 years, it's going to be 10.8%, which again we divide by 100. So we would write that as 0.108. And now it's being compounded semi-annually. So this means twice a year. So we would divide this by 2. Now that our timeline is set up, we can start working on our answer. We're going to use compound interest. So in other words, A equals P 1 plus I to the power of n in order to describe the growth in this particular case. And A is what we're going to be calculating, the value of the investment at the end of 6 years. Okay, so let's start by writing down A. It would be equal to 30,000 Rand is what is deposited initially, and it grows at an interest rate of 12%, so 0.12 compounded monthly. And now we need to work out the value of N. It's compounded monthly for a period of 2 years before it changes. So we must say 12 times 2 because it will be compounded 24 times overall in this period. Then additionally, this money stays in the account and it continues to grow at a new interest rate. So we would write that as the bracket 1 plus 0.108 compounded twice yearly. And how long is this money in the account for? For 4 years, from T2 to T6. So we would say 2 times 4. We pop that into the calculator. Remember to round your answer to 2 decimal places when dealing with money, and this gives us 58,017 Rand and 51 cents at the end. Okay, so that is how we would set out and answer question 7.3. Question 7.4 is also a timeline question, and again we need to read from the beginning to the end to work out the period of time that we're dealing with. So here we're talking about Mary. She's deposited 25,000 Rand into a savings account with an interest rate of 18% per annum compounded monthly. Mary withdraws 8,000 Rand from the account 2 years after depositing the initial amount. She then deposits another 4,000 into the account 3.5 years after the initial deposit. What amount will Mary have 5 years after making the initial deposit in this account? So we need to set our timeline up for 5 years. So T0 is when it begins, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. Okay, so let's start beginning adding in the money. So she deposits 25,000 Rand in the beginning, so that's 25,000 Rand deposited at T0. 2 years later, so at T2, she withdraws 8,000 Rand. So we will write minus 8,000 above T2. And then at T3.5, she ends up depositing another 4,000 Rand into the account. So we will record that as follows. The interest rate, we note, does not change over the entire 5-year period. It's always charged or given as 18% per annum compounded monthly. So let's write that down. That does not change from the beginning through to the end. So 18% per annum compounded monthly, 18 divided by 100 and then divided by 12. Again, we're going to use compound interest. A equals P, 1 plus I to the power of n, in order to describe the growth of Mary's investment. Okay, so setting this out as follows. A equals the 25,000 Rand she initially deposits. It grows at an interest rate of 18% per annum, compounded monthly, for the entire period. So from the time that it is deposited at T0 all the way through to the end. Okay, so that means if it's being compounded monthly and it's in the account for 5 years, we would write to the power of 60, 12 times 5. We then need to subtract the 8,000 Rand that Mary withdraws 2 years into her investment, plus she's going to lose any interest on this money, so we're including the bracket. And for how long is that money going to be out of her account? Well, it would be for 3 years, from T2 to T5. So we would need to multiply 12 by 3. And then the last thing that we would need to do is add in the 4,000 Rand that she deposits 3.5 years into the investment. This is also going to gain interest at the same interest rate. Only now it's going to be in the account for 1.5 years. So if it's going to be in the account for 1.5 years compounded monthly, it means that it will be compounded 18 times. So that will be to the power of 18. Again, as always, when we're working with money, we would need to round our answer off to 2 decimal places. We would put that into our calculator and we would discover that our answer would be 52,636 Rand and 74 cents. I hope you found this video useful.